My own family stole my house and then told everyone I was imagining it, like I was unstable. But what they didn't realize was the money tied to that property had been moved through accounts they thought I would never trace. And the moment I pulled the official records and flagged the discrepancies, it triggered a federal review that started quietly and ended at exactly 6:42 a.m., when everything they built their lies on began to collapse. Because by then, it was no longer a family dispute, it was a case, and the outcome did not just cost them the house, it cost them their freedom. I'm Ava, and this is how they went from controlling everything to having nothing left. Chapter 1. The Key I Didn't Ask For. The moment she said the number, the entire room went silent. $420,000. I hadn't even opened the backs yet, but something in my chest tightened, like I already knew this wasn't going to be normal. Christmas dinner had always followed the same quiet pattern. Warm enough to look perfect from the outside, but never warm enough to reach me. I knew where to sit, how much to speak, how to disappear just enough to keep the peace. Across the table, Claudia laughed too loudly at something Sienna said, her hand resting lightly on Gavin's arm like she owned the space between every person in the room. Sienna barely looked up from her phone, scrolling with one hand while eating with the other. I sat where I always did, present but never central, included but never chosen. Evelyn arrived late. That alone shifted something. She never arrived late. The front door opened and conversations softened, chairs adjusted. Claudia's smile tightened before she stood to greet her, like even she couldn't fully control the room anymore. Evelyn walked in calmly, carrying something small in her hand. Her eyes found mine immediately, not briefly, not casually. She held my gaze long enough to make me uneasy, like she had already decided something about me before I even knew it existed. Then she walked over and placed the small box in front of me. No explanation, no smile, just a quiet, deliberate movement. I stared at it for a second. I thought it was just a gift, something polite, something expected. That was how things worked here. Gestures without meaning, kindness without weight. Still, I hesitated before opening it. I wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the way Evelyn was still watching me, waiting for something I didn't understand. I lifted the lid. Inside was a key. Simple, polished, heavy. I turned it slightly between my fingers, trying to make sense of it. Before I could ask anything, Evelyn spoke. "It's the key to your apartment." The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was shock, sharp and immediate. Then Sienna laughed, a quick, disbelieving sound. "What apartment?" Evelyn didn't look at her. She kept her eyes on me. "The one I bought you, $420,000, fully paid." Something slipped from Claudia's hand. Her glass hit the floor and shattered, the sound echoing louder than it should have. Gavin stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor, but he didn't say anything. He just stared at Evelyn, then at me, like something he believed was stable had just been rewritten. My fingers tightened around the key, and in that exact moment, something else settled in. A quiet, creeping awareness. Evelyn had not looked surprised once. Not when the room went silent, not when the glass shattered, not even when Sienna questioned her. She had expected every reaction. She had predicted it, which meant this was never just about giving me something. This was something she had planned, carefully, deliberately, like a move placed on a board before anyone else realized the game had already started. And somehow, without understanding how, I felt like I had just been moved into position. This didn't make sense. There had to be a mistake. There must be some misunderstanding, Claudia said, her voice losing control, the composure she relied on starting to crack. A man stepped forward. Daniel Reeves. I recognized him from a distance, always standing beside Evelyn, always quiet, always observing. "There isn't," he said calmly. "The deed has been signed, notarized, and recorded. The property is under Miss Marin Calloway's sole ownership. All documents are currently held in escrow under my supervision until she takes possession. Each word landed with precision, final, unmovable. I felt something cold settle under my ribs. 2 weeks, that was what his tone told me. This had been done already, finalized, decided, and I had been sitting here every day since, completely unaware. Evelyn knew. She chose not to tell me. "Wait, she owns it already?" Sienna asked, her voice rising, disbelief turning into something sharper. "Yes," Daniel said, "legally and irrevocably." Irrevocably. The word echoed in my mind. I turned to Gavin. He didn't look at me. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed somewhere else, like something he believed was stable had just been rewritten. And suddenly, everything started connecting. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like pieces that had always been there finally lining up. The way Claudia corrected me in front of guests, the way Sienna took things from my room and laughed when I said something, the way I learned slowly that speaking up only made things worse. I was 12 when my mother died. Helen, the only person who ever made this house feel like it belonged to me. 2 years later, Claudia moved in and everything shifted. Not enough to explain, just enough to understand. I adjusted. I stayed quiet. I made myself smaller. And for the first time, I realized something I had never let myself say out loud. It wasn't that they forgot about me. They chose not to see me. "I mean, seriously, why her?" Sienna said, cutting through the silence. There it was, clear, unfiltered, exactly what had always been there. Evelyn answered without hesitation, "Because I chose her." No explanation, no justification, just a decision. The room didn't recover from that. Claudia didn't sit down, Gavin didn't move, Sienna didn't laugh again. And I sat there, the keys still in my hand, the weight of it pressing into my palm, more real with every second. This wasn't a gift, it wasn't random, it wasn't kindness. It was something planned, something decided long before tonight. I looked down at the key, my reflection faint in the metal. For the first time in years, something shifted inside me. Not confusion, not fear, something sharper. Because this wasn't just about giving me an apartment. And for the first time, I had the unmistakable feeling that this wasn't about giving me something. It was about taking something away from everyone else.
Chapter 2. The Life I Was Supposed to Accept. I had spent years believing nothing in that house was ever truly mine, and now, watching them react, I realized something else. They were afraid. Claudia stepped closer to the table, her voice tight but controlled. "This doesn't make sense," she said. "We're family. Things like this should be shared." Shared. The word sounded different now, not generous, entitled. Sienna leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the key in my hand. "Yeah," she added, "you can't just give everything to one person." I stayed quiet. I didn't defend myself. I didn't need to. For the first time, I wasn't the one trying to make things easier. Evelyn looked at both of them without changing her expression. "Everything," she repeated. No one answered. The silence stretched long enough to become uncomfortable, and I let it, because I was starting to see it clearly. This was never about fairness. It was about control. I looked down at the key again, turning it slowly between my fingers. A year ago, this would have felt impossible, but then again, so had everything else that quietly disappeared from my life. I wasn't treated badly in ways anyone could easily point to. That was the problem. There were no scenes, no yelling, no obvious cruelty, just small differences, small decisions, small moments that always seemed to land in the same direction. Sienna always had a little more attention, a little more patience, a little more forgiveness, and over time, that little more became everything. I remember 2014 like it never really left. I got into UC Irvine with a partial scholarship. I read the email 3 times to make sure it was real. I stood in the hallway outside my room, staring at my phone, trying not to smile too much in case someone saw me. It felt like a way out, like I finally had something that belonged to me. I completed everything: forms, documents, deadlines. I checked every detail twice. I didn't want to give anyone a reason to say I wasn't enough. Then it disappeared. The school said my file was incomplete. They said I never finished the process. I knew I had. I went back to my email. The messages were gone. Attachments missing. Entire threads empty. Not deleted, just gone. I remember calling the admissions office, standing in the kitchen trying to stay calm while explaining what happened. Gavin was there, sitting at the table, listening. He heard everything, every word, every pause, and when I hung up, he said nothing, not a question, not a suggestion, nothing, like it wasn't his place, like I wasn't his responsibility in that moment. That silence stayed with me longer than anything else. I kept searching, trying to find proof, trying to find anything that made it make sense. Then one afternoon, I walked past Claudia's office. Her laptop was open. I wasn't even trying to look, but I saw it. UC Irvine, my name in the subject line. My body stopped before my mind did. I stepped closer, just enough to read a few words, before she closed it, too fast, too clean, like she had already been expecting me to see it. "What was that?" I asked. She smiled, soft, calm, controlled. "Maybe you just weren't ready," she said. That was all. No explanation, no concern, just a sentence that made everything feel like it was my fault. And for a long time, I believed her, because the alternative was worse. If I didn't believe her, then I had to accept something else, that it wasn't a mistake, that it was a decision, and I had no way to prove it, no evidence, no support. The only person who heard what happened chose silence, and I was left standing there holding nothing, trying to convince myself it was normal. I stopped expecting things after that. I started working, early, small jobs, then better ones. I built something for myself piece by piece, carefully, quietly, without asking for help. But the feeling never went away, that something had been taken from me. Not loudly, not violently, just quietly enough that no one else would notice. Evelyn came back into my life in 2019, my mother's sister, the only person who still reached out. At first, it was occasional, short calls, simple questions. Then one day she came over when Claudia and Sienna were out. We sat in the living room. The house felt different without them, quieter. She looked at me for a long time. "Are you okay here?" she asked. I smiled. "I'm fine." She didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes, like she was looking past what I said, trying to understand what I didn't. After that, I started calling her, not because I needed something, but because she listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't correct me. She didn't make me feel smaller. And now she was here, standing in this room, watching everything unfold like she had already seen it before. Claudia stepped forward again, her voice sharper now. "This isn't right," she said. "We should have talked about this." "We," Sienna added quickly. "Yeah, we should have known." Evelyn looked at both of them. "You should have known what?" she asked quietly. "That something was finally given to someone else." The words landed harder than anything else that night, because they weren't even trying to hide it anymore. I felt it again, that realization, clearer this time, stronger. They didn't care about what I lost. They didn't care about what had been taken from me. They only cared about what I had now, and for the first time, I let that thought stay. I didn't soften it. I didn't make excuses for them, because something inside me had shifted, and I was starting to understand something I should have seen years ago. This was never about fairness. It was about control.
Chapter 3. What she saw before I did. I didn't expect the email to change anything. Not really. People like Claudia never admitted they were wrong. They adjusted the story until they looked right again. But this time, something cracked. Evelyn didn't say much after I forwarded her everything. She just nodded once, slow, deliberate, like she had been waiting for confirmation. Not proof, confirmation. That was the difference. "Give it a day," she said. That was all. I didn't ask what she meant. I was starting to understand that with Evelyn, silence wasn't absence. It was movement happening somewhere I couldn't see yet. The next morning, Claudia called. Not text, not passive-aggressive silence. A call. I let it ring twice before picking up. Her voice came out too quickly, too controlled. "I think we need to talk." Not an apology, not concern. Control. "I'm listening," I said. A pause. Just half a second, but enough to feel it. "There seems to be some confusion about the property documents," she continued. "Your father's records weren't always organized." There it was. Gaslight. Clean. Professional. I almost laughed. "Claudia," I said quietly, "the documents are from UC Irvine's housing archive, digitized and timestamped." Silence. Longer this time. "You don't understand how these things work," she replied, but the confidence wasn't there anymore. "Those systems can be misfiled, outdated." Outdated. Right. "I have the original signatures," I said, "and the notarization records." Another pause. And then I heard it. Not anger. Fear. "You're overreacting," she snapped, but it came too fast. "No one is taking anything from you." That word. Anything. So there was something. "Then why are you calling?" I asked. She didn't answer immediately, because she didn't have one that worked anymore. "We'll discuss this as a family," she said finally. "In person." Translation: contain the damage. "I'll be there," I said. And this time, I meant it differently. Not as someone trying to fix things, but as someone ready to watch them break. When I walked into the house that evening, everything looked the same. Same polished floors, same carefully arranged photos, same illusion of stability. But the air felt different, tighter, like something invisible had shifted. Sienna was already there, sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like none of this mattered. Gavin stood near the window, arms crossed, pretending to stay neutral. Claudia was in the kitchen, but I could feel her watching me before she even turned around. No one said hello. Of course not. Claudia stepped forward first. "We need to clear something up," she said. Not "we need to talk." Clear something up, like this was a misunderstanding. I didn't sit. I already did. That was new. And she noticed. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I reviewed the documents you sent," she continued, her voice measured, "and while they appear official, they don't reflect the current ownership status." There it was again, rewriting reality. "Then show me the updated ones," I said. She hesitated, just a fraction, but enough to feel it. "They're being processed," she said. Of course they were. Sienna finally looked up, rolling her eyes. "Why are you making this such a big deal?" she said. "It's just a house." Just a house. I turned to her. "Then move out," I said. The room went still. Sienna blinked, caught off guard. "That's not what I meant," she snapped. "I'm saying you're acting like someone whose name is on the deed," I cut in. She stood up now, defensive. "You weren't even here. We took care of everything while you were gone." There it was, the entitlement, the justification, as if absence erased ownership. I stepped closer, not raising my voice. "And how long were you planning to keep that arrangement?" I asked. She didn't answer, because she didn't have one that sounded good out loud. I looked at Claudia. "How long?" I repeated. Claudia's jaw tightened. "We made decisions that were best for the family," she said. "Not legal, not fair, best." "For who?" I asked. Another silence. Gavin shifted slightly, like he wanted to say something, but didn't. Of course he didn't. He never did. And that was the moment it clicked. Not just what they did, but how long it had been happening. The quiet adjustments, the small exclusions, the conversations I wasn't part of. This wasn't one decision, it was a pattern, a slow, deliberate erasure. And suddenly, it wasn't about the house anymore. It was about everything. "What else?" I asked. Claudia frowned. "What do you mean? What else did you decide without me?" Her expression flickered, just for a second, but I saw it. There was more. Sienna scoffed, trying to regain control. "Oh my God, you're being dramatic," she said. "No one was plotting against you." I looked at her, calm, steady. "You moved your things into my room. You redirected my mail. You changed utility accounts into your name." Her face tightened. "How did you—" "Because it was easier than you thought. When people assume you won't look." Claudia stepped in quickly. "This is getting out of hand," she said. "We're not going to tear this family apart over paperwork." Paperwork. I almost admired the consistency. "It's not the paperwork," I said, and for the first time, my voice shifted. Not louder, sharper. "It's the fact that you thought you could take something from me and I wouldn't notice." That landed hard. Claudia didn't respond immediately because there wasn't a version of this where she was right anymore, and she knew it. For the first time, she wasn't controlling the narrative. She was reacting to it. Sienna crossed her arms, doubling down. "Even if your name's on it," she said, "what are you going to do? Kick us out?" There it was, the real question. Not denial, challenge. I met her gaze. "I don't have to," I said. She frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," I continued, "you might want to start thinking about where you're going next." Claudia's head snapped toward me. "Excuse me?" I didn't look at her, not yet, because something had shifted and I could feel it. The balance, the weight in the room. For the first time, they weren't certain, and I was. "You don't get to decide what happens here anymore," I said quietly. Now I looked at Claudia, and I saw it. Not anger, not control, fear. Real, unmistakable fear. Because she finally understood. This wasn't a conversation she could manage. This wasn't something she could spin. This was something she could lose. And for the first time since I walked into that house, I wasn't trying to keep the peace. I was watching it collapse. And something told me this was only the beginning of what they were about to lose. Chapter 4. The Line I Finally Drew. I did not stay long enough to hear them recover. By the time I reached the driveway, my phone was already vibrating. Evelyn. "I assume they pushed back." "They tried," I said, "but they are not denying anything anymore. They're just trying to reshape it." A brief pause. "They always do," she replied. "Are you ready to finish this?" I looked at the house one more time. It felt smaller now, like something built on a version of the truth that could not hold up anymore. "Yes." "Then come in this morning. I want everything locked before they react." They would react. They always did when control slipped. The office felt like a different world. Clean, quiet, precise. Daniel was already waiting, a folder open in front of him. "Good," he said. "We expected movement." "What kind of movement?" He slid a printed notice toward me. "Your stepmother filed a request at 6 this morning. She is asking for a review of the transfer history." Of course she was. "She's trying to stall," I said. Daniel shook his head. "She's trying to find an opening. There is none." Evelyn sat across from me, calm, steady, completely unaffected. "They will not find anything," she said. "Every document was processed correctly, every signature verified." Daniel tapped the page lightly. "The county recorder has already updated the ownership record. As of this morning, it is officially in your name." That landed differently. Not just confirmed, recognized, system level, real. "They cannot reverse it," he added. "There is no legal path left." I nodded slowly. This was not a possibility anymore. It was a fact. Evelyn leaned forward slightly. I did not choose you out of pity, she said. I know. She shook her head once. I want you to understand it. Her voice softened, but only enough to carry weight. You showed up when no one else did, not when it was easy, not when it was visible. I stayed quiet. You called when I was alone. You visited when it was inconvenient. You noticed things people ignore. A small pause. I've lived in a house where presence was conditional, where people only came close when they needed something. I felt that. Deep. This was not generosity, she said. This was correction. Something settled in me. Not relief, something stronger. Alignment. Daniel closed the folder. If you are ready, we can initiate full possession immediately. Locks, access, utilities, all transferred within the week. I am ready, I said. That was it. Not hesitation, not doubt, a decision that had already been building long before this moment. When I returned to the house, the atmosphere had changed again. Sharper, more unstable. Claudia was standing in the center of the living room, arms tight at her sides. Sienna was pacing, faster than before, like she was trying to outrun something she could not control. Gavin stood near the wall, still silent, still watching. Claudia spoke first. What did you do? No greeting, no pretense. I finalized what was already mine, I said. Her eyes narrowed. You went behind our backs. I stepped forward, calm. No, I stopped letting you act in front of me. Sienna let out a frustrated laugh. This is insane. You are blowing everything up over paperwork. I looked at her. It stopped being paperwork the moment you moved into my space like I did not exist. Her expression shifted, just slightly. You were not even here. We handled everything while you were gone. I nodded once. That's exactly the problem. She hesitated because she did not expect agreement. Claudia stepped in, her voice sharper now. We made decisions for the stability of this family. I met her gaze. You made decisions without me. Silence. Gavin shifted slightly, like he was about to speak. Then he did. You could have talked to us, he said quietly. It didn't have to go this far. I turned to him. Finally. You could have told me the truth. His mouth opened slightly, then closed, because he knew. That was the moment. Not when the documents were confirmed, not when the system updated. This. The realization that silence was a choice, and he chosen it. Sienna stepped closer, more aggressive now. So what, you just take everything and expect us to figure it out? I walked past her, reaching for the keys on the counter, the same keys she'd been using like they belonged to her. I'm not taking anything. I'm taking back what you assumed you could keep. Claudia's voice cut in. This is not over. I turned to her. It is. And this time, there was nothing left for her to argue against. It's recorded, I added, filed, recognized. There is nothing left to change. That hit harder, because it wasn't emotion, it was structure, reality. Sienna crossed her arms, her voice tightening now. Even if your name is on it, what are you going to do? Kick us out? I met her gaze. I don't have to, I said. She frowned. Then what does that mean? It means you should start planning your next move. Claudia stepped forward, anger rising. You are making a mistake. Families don't survive this. I held her eyes. This family was already broken. You just expected me to keep pretending it wasn't. Gavin looked away. Sienna scoffed, but it sounded thinner now. You owe us, she said. I shook my head. No. I took a step closer. You owed me honesty. You chose silence. That landed. Hard. No one spoke, because there was nothing left to defend. I exhaled slowly. I spent my whole life trying to be enough for this family, and I was never going to be. I looked at Gavin. He didn't move. He didn't speak. And that told me everything I needed. I nodded once. That's all I needed to know. Sienna's voice broke slightly. So that's it? I picked up the keys, feeling their weights settle into my hand. I'm not walking away, I said. I met her eyes. I'm choosing where I belong. I turned toward the door. I'll be taking full possession this week. Not a threat, a timeline. I stepped outside without once. For the first time, I didn't ask permission. And they still thought this was about the house. It never was.
Chapter 5. The Life That Finally Felt Like Mine. 2 weeks later, I woke up to sunlight stretching across the floor of my new place in La Jolla. It came in soft, steady, without interruption. No shadows shifting under doors, no voices carrying through walls, no tension waiting for me before I even opened my eyes. Just light, just quiet, just mine. I stayed in bed a little longer than usual, not because I was tired, but because I could. There was no one to report to, no one to anticipate, no one deciding how my day should begin. When I finally got up, the air felt different, cleaner somehow, like I had stepped out of a version of my life that never quite fit and into one that did. I made coffee slowly, watching the steam rise, listening to the quiet settle around me instead of pressing against me. My phone buzzed. Sienna. 3 missed calls. I let the screen go dark. A message followed. She said she needed help, that things were falling apart faster than she expected, that bills were piling up and accounts she relied on were no longer accessible. I read it once. Then I put the phone down. Another message came through minutes later, less controlled this time. She said I knew what I was doing, that I had cut them off without warning, that I was making things harder than they needed to be. I did not respond, because for the first time, I was not the one responsible for stabilizing what they broke. Later that day, I heard more, not from them, from someone else. Sienna had moved out, not by choice. The lease she'd thought she could extend had been denied. The accounts she depended on had been flagged and closed. The life she built on assumptions had nowhere left to stand. It was not dramatic. No confrontation, no scene, just consequence. Claudia sent an email that evening, shorter than the last, less controlled. She wrote about family again, but the tone had changed. Less authority, more distance. She said she hoped I was doing well, that maybe one day we could talk without everything feeling so complicated. I read it, then I closed it. There was nothing left to untangle. Some decisions close doors that do not reopen the same way. Gavin called once. I answered. His voice carried something unfamiliar, not control, not indifference, regret. I should have said something sooner, he admitted. I stood by the window, looking out at the ocean, letting the sound of it steady me. Yes, I said. He let out a quiet breath. I thought keeping things calm was the same as doing the right thing. It is not, I replied. Another pause. I see that now. I believed him, but belief did not change outcome. I am not asking you to come back, he said. I just did not want to leave things unsaid. I nodded slightly. You did not, I said, and that was enough. We did not need to revisit anything else, because clarity does not require repetition. A few days later, Evelyn visited. She walked through the apartment slowly, taking everything in with that same quiet awareness she always carried. You like it, she said. I do. It feels different. She studied me for a moment. It feels like you, she said. We stood by the window, the light shifting across the room as the afternoon settled. You handled everything with more restraint than most people would, she added. I shook my head lightly. I just stopped accepting what did not belong to me. She nodded once. You were never the problem, she said. That stayed with me. Not because it erased anything, but because it clarified everything. After she left, I sat in the quiet again, not empty, not waiting,
complete. Weeks passed. The noise from before faded. No more calls, no more messages trying to pull me back into something I had already outgrown. And that was when I understood something I had missed for years. I did not lose a family. I outgrew one. The thought did not come with anger. It came with relief. Because for so long I had measured myself against people who were never going to see me clearly. Now I didn't have to. One evening, I stood by the window as the sun dipped lower, the sky turning soft shades of orange and blue. I thought about everything that led me here. Not the arguments, not the documents, the pattern, the quiet ways I had been overlooked, the small moments I had ignored because it felt easier than confronting them, and how all of it led to this. Not revenge, not victory, freedom. I was no longer the version of myself they remembered. I was not the one who stayed quiet to keep the peace. I was not the one who adjusted to fit into spaces that never made room for me. I was someone else now, someone who chose, someone who left, someone who did not look back. If you've ever been the one they underestimated, the one they expected to stay small just to keep things comfortable for everyone else, then you already understand what this feels like. So I want to ask you something. Would you have stayed and kept trying to fix what was never yours to fix? Or would you have walked away the moment you saw the truth clearly? And if you've ever lived through something like this, or you're still in it right now, stay with me. Because there are more stories like this, and some of them will make you see things you have been ignoring for a long time. If this story meant something to you, stay with me, share your thoughts below, and follow along for more stories that might feel a little closer to your own.